Happy Halloween, everyone. My name is Pollymacho, or you can just call me Alex. Based on what I've seen on my YouTube analytics, it appears most of you are older than the usual age for trick-or-treating, but that doesn't mean we can't have a good time this Halloween. Let the kids prowl the streets looking for candy while we all grab a nice beverage and talk about the subject of this video, Fromsoftwares' Gothic horror masterpiece, Bloodborne. Released in 2015 for the PlayStation 4, Bloodborne focuses on your custom character traveling to the city of Yharnam, searching for a transcendent medical discovery called the Pale Blood, a substance known to cure any illness. For whatever reason you choose, cloaked in a foreign garb, you make your way to the city, only to discover things are more complicated than what you expected. Civilians are turning into beasts and tearing apart the flesh of those who were once friends. Those on the verge of sanity rally their comrades as they patrol the streets, looking to purge their city of the beastly scourge. What you'll learn quickly is how your character has been gifted, or some would say cursed, with being an occupant of the hunter's dream. A plane of existence cut off from the rest of the world, with the only company being a doll, a group of gnarly looking but well-meaning messengers, and a hunter of old named Yharnam, providing you with the tools and guidance to become a hunter as you traverse the cobblestone streets of Yharnam. The hunter's dream also grants you a boon that no other is given at the time, the ability to repeat the night and try again. Death will not have a permanent grasp over you while in the dream, so try as many times as you see fit. With this boon, we are given a lead on the night of the hunt. Head to Odin's chapel, and while you're at it, go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good. Bloodborne is one of the finest examples of Gothic horror in video games, and one other type of horror that I'll be sure to talk about later. The horror is significantly contributed to the city of Yharnam. This place feels so lived in with its architecture and level design. The streets are expansive and have plenty of spaces for battles to occur in, but not too large as to come across as unbelievable and rooting immersion, feeling like an actual city that has been thrown into chaos. But the city of Yharnam isn't just filled with impressive geometry and an atmosphere so thick you couldn't cut it with a saw cleaver, but also its remaining populace that want nothing more than to purge the city of an outsider. Enemy placement is excellent, with ambushes constantly happening from beginning to end. Coordination between foes is impressive. In the opening section alone, there's this patrol of enemies wielding various weapons, and they wouldn't be out of place in a mob. Each attack pattern is slightly different and can get the better of you if you're not paying attention. Make it through that, and you'll see a gathering of what looks like a dozen enemies around a burning corpse of a suspended beast. And needless to say, the enemies in Bloodborne are pretty on top of their game. But one of the biggest appeals of Yharnam is the mysteries it presents as you explore the city. The environmental storytelling here is super and raises some really interesting questions as you explore. Questions like, why did the city chain up coffins under lock and key? Why are some of the inhabitants seemingly unaffected from the beast scourge? What keeps killing me in the cemetery? And why is this guy so OP? You'll eventually piece together answers for these questions, but they start off as fun hooks to engage you. And you do this through phases of the night. As you hunt story-required bosses, the night progresses, changing enemies and shifting locations of characters. What you thought Yharnam was will keep changing as the night goes and your hunt continues. On the subject of mysteries, none are more interesting than piecing together the story and lore of Bloodborne. This may be regular stuff for you Seki Soulsborne fans, but for those of you thinking I cast a spell with verbal components just now, basically the developers of Bloodborne Fromsoftware have an interesting and cryptic approach to storytelling. Rather than being told directly to you, the story is more in the details and background, leaving you to connect the dots and piece it together. On your first playthrough, you're probably going to miss a whole lot of things, from optional bosses to hidden weapons to character quest lines to even new areas. I remember talking to my brother and comparing notes on our first playthroughs and discovered I completely missed one of the coolest areas in the game. but I would definitely recommend going in as blind as you can on your first playthrough, because it can be gratifying to draw your conclusions and make discoveries on your own. Then on a second playthrough, look up a guide or watch lore videos done by an internet bard. These supplementary materials are great for getting the most out of your experience and clarifying anything you missed. That willingness to let players miss vital pieces of information and content from its world makes it more intriguing, because clues for the mystery are right in plain sight, such as in item descriptions and environmental details. But if a player isn't interested in that stuff, they still have a fun video game regardless. So the question to ask now is, how is the combat of Bloodborne? The combat in Bloodborne really makes you feel like a monster. Out-of-date memes aside, the combat does make you feel like a hunter. One of the ways it does this is how the game treats endurance. The stamina bar looks pretty small at first, but you'll quickly realize the amount it takes to dodge is pretty minimal, and your distance is bigger than you first expect, so you can cover a large amount of space in a short time with dodging. Additionally, your attacks also use stamina, so managing that bar is essential in combat. This change alone makes combat more fast-paced than the previous Souls games. But what really puts the stake in the metaphorical coffin here is the rally system. When your character gets hurt, there's this short window of time where your health bar will have a section of orange next to red. The orange bar indicates how much health you can gain back, but only if you attack your enemy before the bar disappears. Basically, you have a small window to where if you take damage, rather than retreating in an attempt to heal, you can instead gain health by playing more offensively and hitting the enemy where it hurts, encouraging you into a more fast-paced and aggressive playstyle. You can even gain health by attacking an enemy just after they die. What adds to this aggressive playstyle are your tools for your hunts. In your right hand, you hold a trick weapon, while in your left, you can hold a firearm or torch. Trick weapons are super cool, rather than just being a single weapon like a sword. A trick weapon has an additional mode that changes its moveset. For example, take the Kirk hammer. Its base form is a one-handed sword, but its second turns into a hammer that can bludgeon your foes and break bones, though some weapons stay the same with more powered up functions. Sorry Tanatriss, no new form for you. Depending on what kind of build you're going for, chances are there is going to be a weapon that will cater to your tastes. Sometimes offense is the best defense. Whoever says otherwise clearly hasn't played Bloodborne. There is one defensive shield option in the base game titled the Wooden Shield, an absolute garbage weapon, and should only be used by the most expert and criminally insane players. Most of your other options are more focused on dealing damage or parrying your enemy. Rather than using your firearm to hit enemies from afar, your gun acts as a way to catch them off guard and cause them to stumble, which can lead to a visceral attack where you pull a Kali Ma, dealing a good chunk of damage to your opponent. These mechanics combine into a fast-paced and aggressive playstyle that is really rewarding and a lot of fun to use, especially against other hunters where it's not a fight anymore. It's a dance. The two of you will dart across the room, exchanging blows and waiting for an opportunity to parry. And when fighting beasts, sometimes you can stagger an opponent if you deal enough damage. It's also interesting to note, when you defeat an enemy, the text you see after their death is "Prey slaughtered." Oh, that's a bit grim. The fact I highlighted this detail probably isn't a hint at the possible horrors of what are to come. Right. Anyways, combat. Fast-paced and fun. Now let's talk about another exciting aspect of Bloodborne that makes it stand out. As silly as this may sound, the NPCs of Bloodborne are incredible, in part due to their agency and how enigmatic they can be. Most of the characters in this game are very clear on how much they despise you. From their perspective, you're an outsider who has simply walked in on one of the most dangerous nights in recent memory. So naturally, you'll be met with skepticism from the townsfolk, but that just makes all the faces who are willing to lend you a hand or treat you with kindness all the better. People like the Dweller in Odin Chapel, Gilbert, Ariana, Albert, and Eileen. What makes this even better is that the game has a very consistent rule when it comes to NPCs, that if you choose to, it's possible to kill any of these characters. No one is too important that if you decide to hit them with your weapon, or in my case, accidentally place your controller down and shoot your blunderbuss mid-conversation, they're immune through the boon of OP plot armor. And these characters have their own agency, they're off doing their own things just like you are. It feels organic when you run into them, like your paths just so happen to cross at this particular moment. This combined with the cryptic storytelling makes these encounters interesting because you are unsure when you'll see him again or if you ever will. I always love stories where the main character is just a part of the world, where their goals and desires are just one of many other characters who have their own dreams and aspirations they aspire for, and it just so happens these two meet. And Bloodborne captures that magic of crossing paths with another traveler. And what makes this even better is how you have to work to understand these characters. They don't straight up tell you their backstory and all of their goals. It always feels like there's more to a character than what you see on the surface. And because it's so out of the way and a mystery of what triggers a questline, you may only see a small view of that character. A great example is Jura, or the stupid machine gun guy in Old Yharnam. The first time you enter, he shouts for you to leave and that you're not welcome here. Ignore his request and you will be welcomed with beasts that will attack you on sight and a giant gun with its crosshairs on you. Jura comes across as a crazy person. He's befriended beasts and spends his day on top of a tower, and you may always think that. Unless you haven't been killing the beasts and go through a secret entrance where you catch Jura off guard and discover he is not only a cool dude, but is also a protector for all of the former civilians of Old Yharnam. And you see what I mean? Characters have other dimensions and aspects that are hidden at first glance, but it's only in treading off the beaten path and making those discoveries where their motives are known. I've expressed nothing but love at this point, but now that I've got Bloodborne mid-swing, it's time I parry with my intentions and go in with a visceral attack of deal breakers for you. Let's start with some minor annoyances as a warm-up. While you have the rally system for gaining back health, you can also have consumables called blood vials that you can use whenever. You can carry about 20 at a time, but the problem is that they are consumables, meaning if you use one, it's straight up gone from your inventory. And your blood vials only replenish upon death or teleporting to a new checkpoint, but that only happens if you have blood vials in your inventory. Let's say you have about 40 of them, and you attempt to fight a boss but keep getting dunked on, eventually using all 40 blood vials in multiple attempts. So now you don't have any healing and go in either without healing options or grind for them to come prepared, and that isn't really a lot of fun. A lot of the fun is into going and fighting a boss, but slowing down and grinding isn't really everyone's cup of tea. It certainly isn't mine. The second is chalice dungeons. At first glance, these randomly generated dungeons are sort of elusive mystery, full of secrets with new bosses, weapons, and discoveries, and allowing a passcode system where you can trade specific dungeons with friends. But the concept is the most appealing part. In actuality, the randomized aspect takes away from the mystery with the structured dungeon layout. Once you do a few of them, it becomes pretty standard what to expect, from enemies to dungeon looks to recycled bosses with similar movesets. There are some interesting things to discover, but those discoveries are few and far between. Chalice dungeons are pretty good for getting blood echoes to help in leveling up and purchasing equipment, and on that note, it's time to talk about what can be argued to be the biggest deal breaker for playing Bloodborne. This is something you already know about for those familiar with other Fromsoftware games, but for those of you new to the conversation, welcome. Good to have you. Take a chair. Basically, Fromsoftware games have a reputation for being really hard. Enemies hit like a truck, even the starting ones. These games can come across as unapproachable and only for the hardcore. At first. One of the ways this is highlighted is how the game treats death. If you die before hitting a checkpoint, you will drop all of your currency or blood echoes on your person at the spot where you died. If you want to retrieve them, your goal is to make it back to the point of your death and pick them up. In Bloodborne, they added a feature where an enemy that killed you could be holding onto your echoes. They'll be marked with glowing purple eyes. If you die before retrieving your echoes, like the tide on the beach or deleting your internet history, they are washed away. I'm sure that sounds a bit intimidating for those of you new to this game, and you may be questioning why I'm even recommending this to you. The reason why is because I think it's such an interesting experience that if it intrigues you, I think you should totally try it. Just like any video game, you'll be taught how to play it. Will it result in a lot of deaths and possible frustration? Probably. But it's always important to remember that everyone playing this game, from newbie to absolute mad lad and lasses, have gone through this. It's a universal fact. I know you can do it if you set your mind to it, but that's only if you want to. Are you willing to put up with a game with its eventual satisfaction it can give you when you finally emerge victorious? That's a question you have to ask yourself. If you are and don't know where to start, I'll be sure to link some guides in the description of this video. No matter if you're a veteran of this style of game or if it's your first time, the most important part is you having a good time. Pick a weapon you think looks really cool and like its moveset, and be sure to upgrade it as best you can. Don't be afraid to ask for help from other players or NPC summons. And yeah, have fun. Of course, there's another reason besides having fun that makes Bloodborne so interesting. We're about to enter the point of no return. If your mortal coil is not prepared for the madness that will soon transpire in Yharnam, it might be best to leave now. I'm sure we'll meet again sometime soon, but for those of you who have consumed enough insight and are prepared to flip the curtain, I admire your courage. Let's begin. Remember near the beginning of this video I said Bloodborne was Gothic and one other type of horror? Well, as the game progresses, that second horror is elucidated to be Lovecraftian, a genre of horror coined by H.P. Lovecraft, focusing on the insignificance of humanity and how the universe is full of cosmic entities beyond our comprehension. Attempting to do so will only result in an incurable madness. This shift happens as soon as you defeat Rom the Vacuous Spider, which removes the illusion the city has been cast under, but there are hints of this transition if you explore. But you may be asking right now, how is Bloodborne a great example of Lovecraftian horror if it's an action game? One of the core principles are the incomprehensible truths that could scramble the minds of mere mortals. How do you adapt that into an action game where you fight bosses and get stronger as the game goes on? I believe the game does this in three very impactful ways. The first is the mechanic of insight. Insight is a resource gained from consuming an item called Madman's Knowledge or discovering new locations and bosses. Insight can buy exclusive items or summon NPCs or players to help you in hunts, but keeping a stockpile of insight does a few interesting things. One of them helps you view the world before the big reveal. Another part makes you more vulnerable to a status condition called Frenzy, which slowly grows a bar until it reaches its peak, dealing a massive amount of damage to you. The only way to decrease this efficiency is to use sedatives. Mechanically, this incorporates the thematic idea of insanity in a gameplay loop where death isn't a huge setback. The more insight you gain, the more you are susceptible to frenzy damage, while the more you call upon your fellow man and work together, your insight into the world of cosmic horror decreases, and that's pretty cool. The second way it remarkably adapts Lovecraftian horror is through scale. Besides the humans transforming into beasts and otherworldly creatures, it's important to recall that you are not fighting all of the Great Ones themselves. You are only fighting parts of them or lesser ones, such as an Amygdala, the mind of Mensis, and Murgo's wet nurse. The Great Ones are such an alien concept, understanding them is impossible. Even one of the few Great Ones in Yharnam, Abridis, daughter of the Cosmos, is one that was left behind by her own kind. You never get a clear picture of all of the Great Ones, only a few remaining bits left over in Yharnam, and that grounds the experience. If you can beat all the Great Ones and overcome every single obstacle, it's not truly Lovecraftian, but what solidifies the experience of Bloodborne as a great adaptation of Lovecraft is its endings. All three of them are great in different ways, and I'd love to talk about them. Keep in mind that this is my interpretation of them, so please don't take this as the official readings of what canonically is supposed to happen in these games. It's just some ideas I'm trying to bounce off you. Once you defeat Murgo's wet nurse, the night begins to end, summoning you back to the hunter's dream, to where Garum is waiting for you. Seeing as you performed your service as a hunter, Garum offers to kill you, allowing you to awake in the real world. Doing so disconnects you from the hunter's dream and leaves you in Yharnam in the dawn of a new day. It's what the doll always wanted for you. This ending appears hopeful at first. You're escaping out of the city as the day approaches, but here's some things to consider. By allowing Garum to kill you, you're rejecting all you have learned in Yharnam. You're choosing blissful ignorance over knowledge. And consider the fact Jura and Eileen both mention the hunter's dream to you, implying that they were once in your position, and the fact that you can still meet them chose the same decision you did just now. But why are they still in Yharnam if they chose to disconnect from the dream? If it's for the purpose they have committed themselves to, or is it once they took the role as a hunter, they couldn't let that go in their own way? It's something to consider, at least. Let's say you wanted to understand Yharnam or have entered a sort of bloodlust as a hunter and reject Garum's offer to leave the dream. This leads to a final duel with Garum. Upon defeating the old hunter, you come into contact with the Great One, the Moon Presence, who entraps you, binding you to the hunter's dream, fulfilling the same role Garum had done for you, acting as a mentor as the hunt begins once again. This is my favorite of the three endings because I love the thematic idea behind it. For whatever reason you choose, whether for the desire of understanding or overconfidence, you attempt to pull the curtain, only to discover it was out of your reach and always will be as you are now. As you explore Yharnam, you are constantly seeing examples of scholars attempting to delve into the cosmic truths of the universe, always ending in madness or losing some humanity. This ending suggests that even after viewing those fates time and time again, you didn't listen and believed your case would be different because you were the player. But it's ultimately ending the same way. Humanity is an insignificant speck to the Great Ones. But what if you realized this truth already, but decided you needed to evolve? This leads up to the third and final ending. If you found and consumed the hidden umbilical cords before rejecting Garum's offer, the Moon Presence reveals itself and attempts to entrap you, but this time you repel the beast, leading to the game's final boss fight. Upon defeating the Great One, you transcend your humanity, becoming a Great One yourself, though one in its infancy. This ending implies to understand the cosmic truths, you must reject your humanity and become one of these creatures yourself. You are still young in the universe, but you have the potential for growth. You have transcended your being. It's hard to categorize what to feel in this ending. True, you're away from the horrors of Yharnam, but you have lost the very thing that made you human, your relationships, your strength, and even your individual look as a custom character, transforming into a currently helpless creature being taken care of by the doll. The future is uncertain, for better or worse, we may never know. The endings all thematically play into the idea of Bloodborne, from rejecting the eldritch truths, attempting to understand them, resulting in madness and enslavement, or transcendence into the cosmos. And that's where the true horror of Bloodborne lies. No matter how many levels you gain or how many beasts you kill, it's all bound to repeat. In a way, the game was rigged from the start. Bloodborne is a masterful example of horror in a video game that will leave the player with questions about the world after the credits roll, while offering rewarding gameplay in a city that begs to be explored. Whether it's your first time in the city or another visit as an experienced hunter, I highly recommend treading the streets and playing this game, and I hope you have a great time with it. I hope you had a great time today watching this video. If you feel charitable, I would appreciate a fine or foul rating on this video and subscribing if you want to see more of my videos, but that's ultimately your call, and if not, that's totally cool too. Thank you so much, and happy Halloween.